In the previous segment of our two-part series, we dwelled into the historical intricacies of the India-China border standoff, providing the essential context for the complex relationship between these two nations. We'll attach the link to the first part in the description. Do watch it to understand this part better. Now, in the second part of our series, we'll look into the geostrategic ramification of China's rise. We'll traverse the landscape of economics, technology and diplomacy, deciphering the ripple effects felt far beyond China's borders. We'll also put the spotlight on how India and the world are responding to the dragon's rise, what strategies are being deployed, and in the process, what alliances are being forged. The answers to these questions might just reshape our understanding of the current global dynamics. So without further ado, let's get started. For most part of the 20th century, China was not internationally perceived as rising. This was because of the excessive foreign intervention, ideological struggles between communists and nationalists, and a devastating war with Japan during 1937 to 1945, followed by a civil war, occurred in China. Mao's successful 1949 Communist Revolution brought forth the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, which threw the country into decades of hierarchical struggles and social chaos. It was the succession of Deng Xiaoping in 1978 and his introduction of the gradual market reforms that brought China onto the developmental path again. Further, he also introduced the open door policy in 1980s, in which China adopted a stance to achieve economic growth through the active introduction of foreign capital and technology while maintaining its commitment to communist ideology. As the growth continued, many observers began debating the power transition between China and the US and the formation of a new international order. Geopolitically, the rise of China has complicated the old post-World War II international order founded on the ideological divide between liberalism and communism. Unlike the United States and the former Soviet Union, China had never tried to install regimes in its preference in foreign countries. For a long time, the Communist Party of China never claimed its system of government had any universal appeal. Lately, however, this seems to be changing. By demonstrating that advanced modernization can be combined with authoritarian rule, the Chinese regime has given hope to authoritarian rulers. Further, China's ability to execute major infrastructure projects such as the high-speed rail networks in the shortest possible time without political hurdles has created many admirers, as most of the Western democracies are gridlocked. This poses a threat to liberal democracy across the globe. The issue is appropriately exemplified in the Tiananmen Square protest of 1989. These protests were student-led pro-democracy demonstrations calling for free speech and free press in China. In response to these protests, Chinese authorities imposed martial laws and severe crackdown against the protesters by armed troops. After Mao's challenge to the global institutions, China returned to the international system in the early 1970s, accepted a weaker international role and sought to participate in the institutions and rules set up after the World War. In 1971, the UN General Assembly voted to admit the People's Republic of China as a member, previously occupied by the Republic of China, and as one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. In the first decade of the 21st century, China often proved willing to play by the international rules and norms. As its economy grew, however, Beijing assumed a more active role in global governance, signaling its potential to lead and challenge the existing institutions and norms. China also started to create its own Beijing-dominated institutions. We have all heard about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. These are examples of such institutions. It is interesting to note that China's evolving global governance strategy is most apparent on 4 major issues: global health, internet governance, climate change, and development finance. In short, China is pursuing a multi-pronged strategy towards global governance. It supports international institutions and agreements aligned with its goals and norms, such as the World Bank and the Paris Agreement on the climate change. Yet, on issues which Beijing diverges from the norms of the current system, such as human rights, it seeks to undermine those values and create alternative institutions and models. The contemporary foreign policy of Chinese President Xi Jinping is said to be motivated by the Middle Kingdom complex or the Sinocentrism. Sinocentrism is an ethnocentric political ideology that regards China as the civilized center of the world, surrounded by barbarians and savages. Some commentators view the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative as part of the Sinocentric worldview of China, which in turn is a challenge to the Western liberal economic order. Moreover, as China solidifies its position as a global powerhouse, the implications for neighboring countries, notably India, are becoming more pronounced. Coming to the security aspect, the fact that China holds territorial grievances against many countries in the Indo-Pacific greatly destabilizes the region. In this regard, a recent release of a new official map by China has upset many countries in the region that lays claim to most of the South China Sea, as well as to the contested parts of India and Russia. In it, China clearly showcased its 9-dash line demarcating what it considers its maritime border, claiming almost entirety of the South China Sea, effectively making it a Chinese lake. Currently, some of the outstanding disputes involving China over territorial claims in the South China Sea include the Kuril Islands, Senkaku Islands, Spratly Islands, Scarborough Shoal, Paracel Islands, Socotra Rock and the Natuna Islands. Additionally, these Chinese claims threaten the freedom of navigation and important sea lanes of communications, which are important maritime passages that facilitate trade and the movement of naval forces. Further, the failure of leaders to resolve the disputes by diplomatic means could also undermine international laws governing maritime disputes and encourage destabilizing arms buildup. The rise of China has also raised concerns over the non-traditional security elements in its neighborhood as well as across the globe. Non-traditional security comprises a gamut of human security concerns such as climate change, shortage of food and resources such as energy, infectious diseases, natural disasters, transnational crimes, human and drug trafficking, and mass migration. The recent outbreak of COVID-19 as a global pandemic and the non-transparent handling and disclosure of information by Chinese authorities is a case in point of non-traditional security concerns. Similarly, China has also been accused of state-sponsored cyber attacks and cyber espionage by the US and various other countries threatening the critical information infrastructure across the globe. Further, the misuse of veto power by China to block listing of various Pakistan-based terrorists in the UN Security Council's 1267 Committee sanctions list shows double standards on its professed commitment to tackle terrorism. This issue, in fact, emerged as yet another striking point in the Sino-India relations. Other non-traditional security concerns due to the emergence of a global China includes information warfare, including disinformation campaigns, space militarization, economic coercion, resource competition, technological hegemony due to its dominance in the emerging technologies such as 5G, quantum computing, among others. With an emphasis on the manufacturing towards exports for the rest of the world, China overtook the US in 2011 to become the world's largest producer of manufactured goods. This not only led to China's dominance over the global supply chain, but also had an adverse impact on the fiscal deficit of many countries, including India. Beginning with its entry into the World Trade Organization in December 2001, China rapidly transformed its economy from a low-cost factory to the world to a global leader in the advanced technologies. Along the way, it has not only transformed global supply chains, but also international diplomacy, leveraging its success to become the primary trading and development partner for emerging economies across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. But Beijing's emergence as a global power has also created tensions. Unfair trade practices such as forced technology transfers, restrictions for foreign corporations operating in China, have resulted in a trade war with the US and increasing criticism from Europe and other countries. Further, the disruptions in the global supply chains during the COVID-19 pandemic called into the question of China's credibility as a responsible stakeholder and the future of supply chains that have fueled its economic success story. Apart from the border disputes as discussed in the first segment of this series, India is also facing various threats from a rising China. The maritime security concerns due to China's maritime strategy, often referred to as the string of pearls, poses a grave threat to the security concerns for India in the Indian Ocean region. The string of pearls strategy involves establishing a network of military and commercial facilities in the Indian Ocean. This strategy has been deployed by China to protect its trade interests, as a major chunk of its trade passes through the Indian Ocean and various choke points like the Strait of Hormuz, Strait of Malacca and the Lombok Strait. This strategy is quite evident with the recent development of ports by China in Gwadar, Hambantota, Sitwe on the Bay of Bengal coast in Myanmar, and China's sustained influence in Maldives, among others. It potentially impacts India's maritime security and India's strategic clout in the Indian Ocean region. A number of hydropower projects on the Chinese side of the river Brahmaputra are also a cause for concern for India, particularly the threats of potential water wars. In 2013, China's energy plan listed 3 hydropower projects, Dagu, Jiacha and Jiksu, on the Yarlung Sangpo, known as the Brahmaputra in India, which is close to the Arunachal Pradesh's border. According to the Chinese officials, these dams are run-of-the-river type, where water is diverted to a lower point to generate electricity and later allowed to re-enter the river. However, India has raised apprehensions over these projects on the ground of wide water level fluctuations in the river downstream, potential ecological and environmental damage, challenges to food and water security in India, and the political weaponization through intentional flooding or water scarcity, among others. Chinese dominance in the technologies and applications, particularly those related to the Internet of Things and smart products, poses hazardous security risks. These risks include exploitation of dependency for strategic leverage, the threat of espionage or cyber attacks through backdoor setups, threat to critical information infrastructure deployed on Chinese hardware, among others. Owing to these concerns, over the last few years, the United States, Britain, New Zealand and India have introduced bans in varying capacities on the Chinese applications and technologies. As a matter of fact, in 2020, the government of India banned multiple Chinese mobile applications and softwares, and even before that, Indian Army listed 89 Chinese applications that personnel must delete from their phones. Further, geostrategically, the emergence of global China poses a significant challenge to the Indian foreign policy design. Increasing Chinese presence in the Indian Ocean region made South Asia a chessboard for the power play between the two nations. South Asian states are pursuing active balancing and bargaining rather than being passive victims of the games being played by the global powers. Similarly, the cooperation between China and Pakistan poses a possible threat of a two-front war for India on its northern and its western frontiers. A recent proclamation by Russia and China stating the friendship between the two states has no limits and there are no forbidden areas of cooperation has made the act of diplomatic balancing between Russia and the West more difficult for India. All these concerns demand recalibration of foreign policy involving a multidimensional approach that spans strategic, economic, diplomatic, and security considerations. Traditionally, in the post-World War II era, the Asia-Pacific region served as the focal point of global attention, a space where major powers vied for influence. However, the rise of China has introduced a shift in the fulcrum of the global geopolitics from Asia-Pacific to Indo-Pacific, prompting nations to reassess their strategic calculations. Indo-Pacific is broadly to be understood as an interconnected space between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Its expanse is debated to be ranging from the eastern shores of Africa to the western coast of United States, albeit with variations in definitions depending on each actor and their own geographic positioning in the vast expanse. Central to this shift is the redefinition of maritime dynamics. naval powers and littoral states alike recognize the significance of securing vital sea lanes and ensuring stability in the vast maritime expanse. Strategic alliances in the Indo-Pacific have become linchpins of geopolitical strategy. Collaborative efforts such as the quadrilateral security dialogue between Australia, India, Japan and the US exemplify the concerted response to the rise of China and the imperative of maintaining a balance of power in the region. Other such initiatives in the region include AUKUS, Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, Indian Ocean Rim Association, Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, among others. As China surged forward, the dynamics of global trade underwent a tectonic shift. Once a manufacturing hub, China evolved into a critical node in the global supply chain, influencing the production and distribution of goods worldwide. In this regard, European Union in 2019 referred to China as a negotiation partner, economic competition and a systemic rival. Nations are currently reevaluating their dependencies and vulnerabilities, seeking to diversify and mitigate risks. The quest for supply chain resilience became of paramount consideration in the wake of China's economic ascendancy. This is quite evident in the Supply Chain Resilience Initiative launched by Australia, India and Japan. Other such initiatives include China Plus One strategy. China's technological leaps added another layer to the narrative. The rapid emergence of Chinese tech giants and associated concerns about data security, intellectual property theft and the security threats led to its diverse responses. For instance, Australia banned Chinese Huawei and the ZTE from providing 5G technology equipment. In India, on the other hand, the Department of Telecommunication amended the licensing condition for telecom companies to include sourcing of equipment from trusted sources only. Further, to counter China's economic influence under its ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, different new trade routes and economic corridors are being undertaken. The most recent one is the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor proposed at the recently concluded G20 summit. India's foreign policy has also responded vigorously to these changes. In this context, India's geostrategic maneuvers include renewed emphasis on the neighborhood in the form of Neighborhood First policy and the Act East policy, as well as on the maritime domain in the form of Security and Growth for All vision. Further, the Government of India, in its advocacy for free and open Indo-Pacific, emphasized on ASEAN's centrality in different forums. It's important to recognize that challenges are not roadblocks but opportunities for dialogue and understanding. In the wake of recent events, there is a silver lining, a renewed commitment to diplomacy, negotiation, and constructive engagement. We have witnessed nations coming together at the table, discussing shared concerns and forging paths towards collaboration. This spirit of dialogue is the foundation upon which peaceful coexistence is built. As we navigate this complex terrain, let's hold on to optimism that genuine efforts towards understanding can pave the way for a more stable and a harmonious future.